We just want to welcome you to the 7th GenMin Camp Director Training webinar. And tonight we're going to be talking about transitioning campers into staff members. So I just want to welcome everybody who's on the call. We have about 10 people or so, and more people will be popping in. And I want to wish you all a happy St. Patrick's Day as well, because it is March 17th. We're going to start by having Carrie Smith open us up in prayer. Thank you, Carrie.
Precious God, we come to you and just say thank you for your presence, for the beautiful day that you've given to us, and for this time that you've given to us to spend together, and for this opportunity to talk about keeping camp going and transitioning as we've seen these kids grow up as campers and grow and develop into young adults, that they become our staffers and the ones that pour into those who they used to be. And I just ask that it is your wisdom and your insight that is shared, that we can share and learn and grow from each other. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, well, thank you for the prayer, Carrie. And tonight I'm really excited about this topic. It's very practical, and I am hoping to learn some things. So when we began with SCP SoCal, Mark and I are directors of SCP SoCal in San Diego. And 15 years ago, we came on as assistant directors. And we didn't really have a plan for transitioning campers into staff. In fact, we were just trying to figure out how to run a summer camp. Dennis Pelly and Lorraine, they did a great job at getting us started. And over the years, we kind of naturally had some leaders pop, and we turned them into staff members, just pretty naturally, relationally, talking to them and asking them if they wanted to come on staff. And then we noticed something happening. We noticed that we had campers who weren't quite ready for staff. They weren't quite mature enough, but they were really too old to be campers. And I think in the beginning, we used to allow 19 and 20-year-olds to be campers. I think we had a 20-year-old once. And then as we started getting more structure with our policies with GenMin, we realized, oh, we can't have a 20-year-old in a dorm with minors that's not fingerprinted, screened, and trained. So all of a sudden, our cutoff was 17. So our campers can't be older than 17 and sleeping in a dorm with minors unless they're fingerprinted and somehow screened and trained. So that kind of changed things a little bit for us in our thinking. We all of a sudden were like, oh, that means when you turn 18, you have to be mature enough to be on staff or you can't come to camp. And the reality of that is pretty drastic, because a lot of our 18-year-olds aren't quite mature enough to be quality staff members. So we were trying to figure out what to do. So we had been to some of the GenMin camp director trainings and the summits, and we'd heard some of you talking about this crew program and some of the other programs that help transition campers to staff. So we sat down and designed something for SCP SoCal called Big Brothers and Big Sisters. And so kind of the way it works at SCP SoCal is when you're 17, you can take a track, which all senior campers sign up for a track at our camp. But one of the tracks that we offer is called Counselor in Training. And at 17, when it's your last year as a camper, you can sign up for that track. And you go to that track 2 hours a day, and you get practical counselor training, what it means to be a counselor, how to handle conflict, and those kinds of things. And then the next year that you come to camp, which you would be 18 and you're able to apply to be on staff, you can apply to be a big brother or a big sister. And you're not, what that means is you kind of still have a counselor. We call them a mentor instead of a counselor. And you sleep together with the other big brothers and big sisters. And you help out with junior camp dorms during the day, and you help out with an activity. But you don't sleep in the dorm with the junior campers. So that's kind of how we've done it. And we've had some successes, but I think we have a long way to go before we make our program effective. And that's kind of one of the things tonight I really want to hear from some of you. And I just wanted to give you a background of how we came to this place of having a need for a really intentional pathway that's effective in not just raising up counselors, but really raising up leaders that can go back to their church areas and serve. And so unfortunately, we still find that there are some who go through counselor in training, and then they go through the Big Brother, Big Sister program, and then I'm still questioning whether they are really ready to be on staff? And so that's going to be a question. I'm going to ask a couple questions along the way. Let me throw them out to you right now before I turn the microphone over to a couple other people from other camps. One question that I want to ask you tonight is, do you have a formal pathway to transition campers to staff members at your camp? Kind of a formal program. I know we all do it, but do you have an intentional program? And number two, I want to hear your successes, maybe some failures of your program. You might call it counselor in training or crew or big brother, big sister. What are some things that have worked well and some things that haven't? And thirdly, how do you handle an immature young adult, so 18, 19, 20? Do you make a place for them at camp, or do you deny them at that point because they're just not mature enough? Maybe let's say they've grown up through camp, they've been a camper for 5, 6, 7 years. Now they're excited to be on staff, but they're really immature. And how do you handle that? So those are some of the questions, and there might be more questions that come up as well. But I wanted to kind of just lay the groundwork for the topic by sharing SAP SoCal's story. And I don't feel like our program is what it needs to be. And so I'd love to make some additions and some revisions to it. And I had some notes from some people that ahead of time who said that they do have programs. Ponch said he has a program at Mountaintop. I know Todd Woods, I believe at Heartland, they were one of the first ones to come up with a crew program. And Toby has something at Montana, SCP Montana. We'll show you that document in a little bit. But before we hear from some staff members tonight about their transition programs, let's go ahead and watch this video from Heartland SCP about crew.
My name is Lynn Meadows, second year on crew. Do you want to see?
Sure.
Okay. I got a froggy that's on the floor now. I came over to Heartland 2 years ago and fell in love with it, and I just kept coming back and just did almost everything. It feels like got connected with the campers really well.
Crew came out of this we were losing our campers about the time that they got 16, and they weren't coming back to come on staff. So we decided that we were going to start this program where if they are going into senior year of high school, that they could come on and apply to be staff. And so their first year that they're on crew, they kind of get an introduction of all things like kitchen and maintenance and kind of grounds crew, all these things that we do, and counseling staff. And then the second year is kind of more specifically to what they want to do.
And you get to see both sides, how the camp is prepared and how everyone gets ready to have a great week.
There's many jobs you can do. Next year, I hope to work in the kitchen still, or, be like a co-counselor.
You're never bored, that's for sure. Tomorrow, I love ya. Tomorrow. Whether you're working or you're just hanging out with the campers, you're always doing something meaningful to somebody, and that's what feels awesome.
We've had somebody in the past who has now taken over team building, and we have currently 3 co-counselors that are right out of crew. So my hope for the ones coming in is more of like maybe a vision for camp and a love for camp and a love for these kids, and kind of just trying to find out what they want to do. I think the coolest thing is just seeing how many older campers we have. Even with boys, we have a lot of 17-year-old campers, and just their excitement with coming into crew.
And we have great leaders. It's a fun time. And if you guys are on crew next year, or whenever you guys get on it, you guys are going to have a lot of fun.
What I want to do is I want to have Carrie Smith share. She serves at a lot of camps, but she took the program that she learned at Heartland and she kind of adapted it for Pathways, and they've been using it pretty successfully there. So what I'm going to do, Carrie, if you want to unmute yourself, I'm going to share my screen, and then I've got all your documents opened up here. So I think I'll start with this one. And these documents will also be available for you to download on the GenMin training Google Drive. So you can take these and make them your own, right, Carrie?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Carrie Smith and let her introduce herself and share about the crew that runs. Maybe she can share a little bit about Heartland and then really share about Pathways.
Well, yeah, I didn't ever do crew at Heartland. I just know Nikki from when I was there, and so I had a phone conversation with her last year about how they did crew and what she does with the kids, and kind of made it our own to work with Pathways. And we've only done it for one summer at Pathways, and have seen a lot of success. So we're excited to have it. And so what we came up with was wanting to have a mission and vision, so it was clear to these campers slash staffers for this transitional year that this is what we're asking you to do. It's not just about that this opportunity to be on staff, but we wanted them to understand kind of we're still pouring into them as they're learning, but as they're kind of learning on the job and leading as well. And kudos to Aaron Frim. He helped put these pictures and make these documents look like a lot more fun than just a bunch of text on the page.
Thank you, Erin.
So that's this mission and vision statement. And so I went over that, with we gave it to any 17-year-olds or first time staffers. And that's kind of the our general demographic that we're seeking out. So if there's someone that's a first time staffer, maybe they've never come to Pathways, and they're 19, 20, even 21, and we don't really know their background or don't know who they are, we're going to invite them to join this program. And because they are essentially staff as crew members, but they meet with me as the crew leader, either every morning, every night, and we'll have an opportunity to go through and talk through the day and different things like that. So, and then I had each crew member sign this when I got with them before we started camp, just to make sure they actually read through it and kind of looked at it. If you go to, and so what we did, those who had been campers that we knew were going to transition and not be able to be campers, we sent them an invitation letter that kind of explained what the program was going to be, what it was going to look like, and we did similar to the Big Brothers Big Sisters that you guys had. And we had the boys and girls have their own, the crew boys and crew girls had their own cabins, and I was kind of the crew leader for the girls. Aaron Frim kind of took that role for the boys, and so that they still had kind of that dorm feel and experience in what they had, and not all of them wanted to work with junior campers. So some of them just wanted to do activity staff and be outside as much as they could. And so we tried to accommodate and allow them to work in the areas that they were most comfortable with. But I can say with this first summer, we had a group of 10 students, and it was helpful because most of them came from the same youth group, so they knew each other. So they did already work well, which if we're already pulling from our campers, most of them are going to know each other and work well. And so that was a lot of fun to see them want to work together and want to do more and volunteer willingly, even on their free periods when we tried to give them downtime to rest, so that they weren't, just the gophers for camp, to just do what we wanted. They were intentionally put into places where they would thrive.
That sounds great. What document would you like next?
Let's see.
You've got the service hours or the
program. Oh no, that was one of the things that the service hours came as from one of the moms right before Pathway started. That because all of the crew members that we had last summer are seniors this year, and so I kept track of the hours that they actually did, that they served each day, and then I signed off on it at the end of the week, and they could take that back to school, to the National Honor Society or to whatever organization they're in, and put it on their resume for their college applications, to show that they did these service hours, supervised service hours without pay, and things. So that was kind of an addendum that, sure, let's give it to them if it's helpful to them. So
yeah, I know here in California, a lot of kids have to have service hours just to graduate. So that's a really helpful thing. So if anybody wants to take that form and adapt it to their own camp, they can do that. So do you want, how about this one? Does that look good? Crew program and responsibilities.
Yeah, and this is the one that we had them sign. I had
Okay.
before that I kind of talked through it with each of them because we wanted them to have kind of the basics, and they definitely noticed closer to the end of the week how tough it can be to be on staff, and the reasons why we gave them breaks throughout the week because they're like, oh man, yeah, it's a lot of stuff. But what I heard from all of them is that they really loved it, what they did, and they, like I said, this was a good group that we had. We were kind of spoiled with this first year because they wanted to get to know the other campers. They wanted to do things, um, for the kids and have fun with them, and so they set that great example. And some of our other senior campers got excited. Oh yeah, I'm going to be crew next year. I'm looking forward to that. And so that was good to see already that momentum and excitement for it. Um, I took Nikki's advice of, well, she would meet with her crew team at night beforehand, and so that's kind of what I did. But I'm going to switch that for this summer because that was they wanted to kind of hang out with the other staff in the evenings, and it makes more sense to meet in the morning, and kind of give them their things. And so you can adjust for that based on your camp schedule, whether you meet with your whole crew at night to debrief the day or in the morning, and whatever goes. But definitely have at least one time where you're meeting with them, I think, each day just to check in, and see how they're doing. And then, like, after the chapels, we would let them sit in on the senior chapels. We would be a crew debrief group, so that they would get to still kind of talk and hear, and again be poured into with the message throughout the week. So
That sounds excellent. Let's see. Are there any other documents, or is that everything for you?
I think that was basically. Oh, I gave them that exit survey right at the end. A couple questions, just again to see if how it went from their perspective, and that's helpful to get it from. It's easy enough for them to complete before they leave, so it's fresh in their mind, and just to have to work with. So
That's good. Those are always good to get feedback.
but,
Very organized. Good job, Carrie. Can I just ask a question? And this will be for anybody else that wants to answer too. Did you have a time of intentional teaching where you talked about or either showed videos or gave them actual training on how to be a good counselor or how to be a good staff member or how to resolve conflict or how to communicate? And then additionally, my second question would be about supervision. Did you let them, let's see, did they get radios and keys and freedom? Did they have to have a buddy? Did you treat them more like staff or more like a camper?
we did not have intentional teaching time. Some of that, I would go over some of it when we would meet as we were able, and different things there. And they were part of our staff training, before
Okay.
camp started. So they got some of it there with all of the staff. And they weren't roam free. They were whatever activity they helped with, they were under that leader. And so whoever the activity leaders were knew who the crew members were. And what we did for their shirts, we had they were a little bit different than our staff shirts. Like we had gray and blue, so we had a lighter gray and a lighter blue, and it said crew on the back, I think. But so that they were still known as staff, but so staff could know, hey, yeah, these are the ones that we're kind of leaning into and helping, and kind of watching over. So
Got it. Okay. That's good. That's a helpful tip. I didn't even think to ask that question about, do you designate, identify with a color who they are, and the supervision. So I don't know if you guys have radios at your camp or keys to the cabins. Were they treated more like campers in that regard, like they had to go see their counselor, their mentor in order to get in their dorms, or do they have free access or carry keys or radios to talk to the other staff?
we don't all carry radios, so they didn't have those. They would, we don't have keys to get into the dorm, so like when they had free time, they were able to go and roam. I did ask them to check in, let me know where they'll be, so in case they are needed, I can find them. But they were, for their free time, they were allowed to be free. And then some of the big senior activities like the dance and things, we intentionally allowed them to participate rather than be
Right.
staff for that part. So
Yeah, that's good. That reminds me, did you have a different, did you have a lights out for them? Do you have a lights out for all your staff? Or is it just, you know, like for us, most our staff that are, of course, in the dorms have the lights out of the age group that they're counseling, but for the other staff, we don't really have a lights out. Did you have a lights out for your crew members?
We did because with our staff, because our main meeting area where the staff congregates has the loft area where staff sleeps. So we make everybody go to bed. And so their lights out was the same time as the staff lights out.
Okay.
Hey, Ann, this is
Yes.
Aaron Frim. I just wanted to jump in.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, in terms of this, Carrie doesn't know this, but the success of the program, I think, can also be seen in how they sign up the following year. And of the 9 people that participated in the program last year, 5 of them have already signed up to be staff. I'm expecting 2 more. They've said that they were going to do it, and then I think the other 2 are as well. So we could have, pretty close to 100% of those people coming back the following year. They enjoyed it. They liked the taste of being a staff member, while at the same time, having the freedom of a camper. But I think they really learned a lot, and are, from in the conversations I've had, they're really, really looking forward to coming back as staff this year. So it's been a really good success, and Carrie did a really good job of really kicking that off this year.
That's excellent. Yeah, that's a great.
That's awesome. I'm so excited to see them all again. One of the things we did try to do a couple of times during the week, we did some crew only activities. Like if we had an open space where they weren't needed elsewhere, we let them do, something together. Like we tried to do team building with them, but then weather got in the way. But just so that they were doing something as a team together. And so that was good to have those moments that kind of popped up throughout the week.
Excellent. So is there anybody else here, anything else on pathways, the crew? Aaron, anything else you want to add to this before I'm going to open it up and see if there's anybody who has a program that they want to mention what they do.
No, I think everything important was covered. Carrie already hit on that, so I think we could go ahead and move on.
Let me ask the rest of the people that are on the call, do you have any questions for Carrie or Aaron about the crew? As she said, they've only done it 1 year, but they did experience it. Carrie did experience it, or talk to somebody who was experienced at Heartland and get some of their input. I don't know if we have anyone from Heartland here tonight. If there is somebody, go ahead and unmute yourself and feel free to share, because I feel like your camp might have been doing it the longest out of all the camps. So unmute yourself if you have a question for Carrie or for Aaron, or unmute yourself if you're from Heartland and you want to share about the crew program going on over there.
And I know for future questions, you can also go to Nikki Davis with Heartland. She'll talk with anybody and share, because her passion is working with that college age, or high school, college age young adults. And so she has been doing it, I think, for 4 or 5 years.
Well, before I let you two go, and especially you, Carrie, let me ask if there's anything that you did last year that you felt did not go well and you definitely are going to change it up for this coming year, or did you just have such a spectacular first year that there's nothing you can do better?
No, like I said, I am definitely the evening meetings sounded great on paper, but that definitely didn't work for our setup and our schedule. And so I will definitely switch to meeting with them in the mornings, and because there was a lag time with our breakfast times, and okay. Like this, we had time, because they would often try to eat meals together. So that's a perfect time to try to catch them while they're kind of fresh. And that gives them a little bit more downtime in the evening. So I'm definitely going to do morning meetings with them, and because we're trying to get them to be up and awake for the staff meetings anyway. So this will just kind of help with that. And
okay.
then I will just continue to do kind of checking in with each of them one-on-one. Like I was kind of running around a lot last year and working with them in a group, but I want to just dig in one-on-one more. So
Excellent. Okay, so thank you, Carrie and Aaron. Is there anybody else here that would like to share what you do, intentional or not, uh, in order to groom campers into staff? And of course, I can't fail to mention what Anthony always says in the power of the ask. And that's, when you see a camper that is in their last year, especially, or second to last year, and you just pull them aside and sit them down and say, wow, I can see you coming on staff at this camp. Sometimes for us, it's so obvious. We're like, well, duh, of course you're going to be a staff member. But for a young kid who's 16 or 17, they may not feel confident, and just to have somebody, a staff member, sit them down and cast a vision into their life will actually probably prompt and encourage them to be a better camper for the rest of that camp season, and because somebody saw something in them that motivated them to shoot higher, to be a leader in the dorm. So I know that that's kind of just the base level, is just be looking around and be sowing seeds of encouragement and of what you see in these young people, and they'll want to come on as staff. And I know sometimes I even do that with the junior campers. I'm like, are you going to keep coming back and be on staff? Yeah. So, but I think the intentional pulling them away and sitting them down and looking them right in the eye and saying, I see you and I see something in you is probably one of the most powerful things. And then now I think if you get the intentional program, the C.I.T or crew up in front, and they have a role to play, then the younger kids can see that kind of the stair steps of how to get to be, on staff and to become a leader of activities, or maybe even a camp director one day. So I think it's a reachable goal. So is there anybody else that would like to share about their program?
Can I say something real quick, Ann?
Sure.
This is Jeff. I would just want to validate what Ann just said there. And actually, that is probably one of the most intangible gifts you can give any of these young people and give any of your camps, is to even on a daily basis, just making a statement, looking them in the eye, pulling them aside, saying, just even joking back and forth with them. One of these days, this is what's going to happen. You're going to be running these dorms. You're going to be doing this, doing that. It does plant it in, and it lets them know that you actually do see them.
Yeah.
It lets them know that you actually do care. And, it'll be easy in some ways to feel like, oh, they're just being nice to me. But when you do it a lot, when you go and you do it again and again, they actually begin to believe it.
Yeah.
And I think as a director or as even key staff, please do not devalue the power of that constant seed plant. That seed will grow.
Thank you, Jeff. Absolutely. Anybody else want to share about what they do at their camp? I know we have other camps represented here. Nobody? Okay. Well, let me pull up real quick. Toby sent me something. He cannot be here. So SCP Montana, they have a program called Staff in Training, C.I.T. So there's C.I.T. and then there's S.I.T. We like to do our acronyms. So the S.I.T. Staff and Training Program is designed to provide practical experience and training for teens who think they may want to become staff members. And it incorporates a combination of part-time staff work, working in the area of service, group staff training, dorm involvement, individual assessment, takedown, and set up and takedown experience, designed to give staff members leadership experience in a part-time in various areas of camp while participating in dorm activities on a part-time. So it looks like they might be part camper and part getting a staff experience. So it looks like they register and tell their preferred area of work, and they have to be between 13 and 17, it looks like. And they have to be recommended by a staff member. I like that. That's good. And it's generally expected, although not required, that you've been a camper at SCP camp in a previous year. And they have an application process, and they list out their expectations, which I think for me, I think that's where we have fallen short, is we have not put our expectations in writing. And therefore, how do you measure whether you're really on target, and how do you discipline someone when they're not meeting your expectations when you never had them sign it? So I think that's something we're definitely going to implement this year. at SCP SoCal. Let's see. Let me go. I'm going to read Ponch's post on the Facebook wall. He said, "We have a process." This is Mountaintop. "We have a process of moving campers to staff. It starts with our big brother/sister program. We also spend time speaking with our campers as they get closer to staff age to determine their interest and what they like doing at camp. Some don't necessarily want to be counselors, but have other desires, and we will partner with them with our other staff positions." So I think the key here, as we just said, is finding a place where they can serve and still, keeping your campers safe. You don't want to put somebody in a role of responsibility that they're not ready for. But I guess that's kind of a question. If there's nobody else who wants to talk about an intentional program they have at their camp, maybe we can just open the floor and brainstorm what you do, with, let's say they're 18, they've gone through crew or staff and training or C.I.T counselor and training, and they're still not emotionally mature enough to take on a staff position. What are some things that we might do with someone like that? Because Mark and I have always said, we'll take just about any camper, and they've got their own meds, or they're distressed, and then they've got a bad home life and they're not very mature. We'll take a camper. But when it comes to staff, you have to be a little bit selective, because you're putting them in a position of responsibility of other people's children. And so at what point do we take somebody who's grown up in the system and say, "I'm sorry, you can no longer come because you're not mature enough"? And I don't know, maybe that's a hard question to answer, but I would just open the floor. We are actually kind of facing that this year at SoCal, because we've got some foster kids that started coming to camp, and they're a little bit older, and now they're too old to be campers. They've gone through the program, and I'm just a little unsure about whether I can actually make them an assistant counselor this year. And we don't have a kitchen, so I can't throw them in the kitchen. We don't have a landscaping crew. We don't, they basically have to come on as a junior assistant counselor. So, yeah. So what do you guys do with that situation when you've got immature campers wanting to be staff?
This is Aaron. I think one of the advantages that we actually have a really big staff, and that's largely because we have to run a lot of our own activities. And what we've typically done with those people that we were never really sure about in terms of maybe their maturity, or we just knew that they were inexperienced, was that it was sort of, where we place them, what activities we put them in. We would always put them with other staff members who would be strong leads and would be good examples. But we never really had to put them into situations where they were a big brother or big sister, or an assistant counselor. So I think maybe that was one way in which we kind of, shuffled people in those different directions. There have been times when we did find out afterwards that it was not a good fit, that, we would not ask them back the following year. Or if we did, we would just kind of keep them in that position where they would be, always with somebody else who could kind of monitor the situation, and hopefully that they would grow in that. So that's kind of what we did, and that's kind of what we still do. The crew has definitely given us a new way of developing staff members, or at least being able to see them before they move into these positions of greater responsibility. So that's been a bonus.
Yeah, I can see how that would be good to have a place that you can put people where they're not responsible directly for the young children.
Right.
Yeah. Anybody else have any comments about handling immature staff or immature campers wanting to be staff?
Hi, this is Susan.
Hi, Susan.
Hey there. As I mentioned in my email, we're actually just finally kind of getting to the point where we can start thinking about this, putting a program in place. So I have nothing to offer, but I think the last year we were kind of so strapped for counselors that we actually had an 18-year-old ex-camper as an assistant counselor and put him with a strong lead counselor, and it worked, but I didn't feel like it really worked as well as it should have. Um, so I'm definitely we're definitely it's on our list this year to really get a program together to start really um, dealing with some of the older campers, because I've got a handful of really strong campers that would make excellent staff. So I'm definitely looking to put a plan in place. But along these lines, we actually have a very interesting little situation that just popped up a couple days ago. I actually have a camper who is 17 and will turn 18 the second day before the end of camp. And he is definitely not somebody I would want, as a staff member at this point. So, I'm not really sure what to do with that situation. But and we certainly don't have to talk about that right now. I don't want to get us off subject, but just it's just an interesting situation that I never thought it just didn't dawn on me I'd have something like that.
Does anyone have anything like any input or thought on advice you might give Susan? By the way, Susan is the director of S.I.T Tahoe in Nevada, the Nevada-California border. And this is she's approaching her 3rd year being a director. So anybody have any thoughts on maybe what she could do with this new situation that just came upon her?
This is Susan again. The one thought I had was that maybe, we could do some sort of a nice little ceremony for him turning 18. And then, I don't know, transitioning him, keeping him in a dorm as kind of like a big brother for the last 2 days, just basically to kind of, have a little bit of a different role with the assistant lead counselor, so he wouldn't have to leave camp. But I
Right.
really don't know what GenMin would really have to do legally.
Yeah, I think it's a great it's a great question, and probably should just say this again in case anybody missed this along the way, is that if you have an 18-year-old in your dorm as a camper, now in this young man's case, he can't go get fingerprinted in the middle of camp. Not necessarily. I suppose you could probably sit down and run a national background check on him the day he turns 18, which maybe that's the solution, Susan. There's an online, we use CenturyLink. I can send out that information, and they could just go in the office if you have internet, and they could sit down. You run their date of birth, social security, and full legal name, and you can get a background check on them, a national background check, so that you have your legal paperwork in the file. Here's the thing, if you have an 18-year-old in a dorm, they must be screened. You can't have an adult sleeping in a room with a minor and not be background checked. So if that's going on at your camp, you just need to find a way to get that done. I mean, I'm not saying that they have to be staff. That for us, that works best. Is
Mm-hmm.
just make the cutoff 17. But I know some camps might have an 18-year-old. They let their staff go to 18. But if they're 18, any 18-year-old on campus, I don't care if they're in the kitchen or they're weeding the garden, if they're sleeping on the same premises with the minors at a GenMin event, they must be background checked. You have to check the Megan's Law, which is basically the sex offender registry, and they need to have the recommendations. So that's
Okay.
just kind of a reminder of that. This is where it gets a little tricky, especially if their birthday's in the middle of camp. So, but it could be done. I think, maybe that's the solution. Just let him stay in the dorm, but just do a background check. Obviously, if he just turned 18, he's not going to have a record. But the thing is, at least you can show your due diligence and having all your paperwork on file. So I don't know. Anybody else have a thought on that? Am I being too stringent? Jeff, what do you think?
No, I think you're spot on. I think that would be a nice transition for him, Susan. That that at least in making that transition, you're not saying he's a staff member, but you're showing not only this young man, but also all the staff and the kids, that when you turn 18, there's a difference for you.
Yeah.
And even if you just take him that day and run that background check and run that sex offender check, just so that you can do your due diligence to keep him there, right? You're
Yeah.
not saying he's staff. He's going to have to apply next year for staff and go through the whole process of getting the two recommendations. Because if he's, like I think you said, if it's one of those situations where you're not sure if you would want him as staff,
Hmm.
it gives you that buffer.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right. Yeah, you wouldn't need the recommendations. You're right, Jeff, because they're not actually coming on as staff, but they
Right.
do need to be background checked and cleared so that you don't have an adult sleeping in a room with a minor that's not cleared. Yeah.
Right.
Any questions on that from anybody else?
I-
Probably some listening tonight have 17-year-olds that actually are on staff. They let staff members come on at 16 or 17 if they're ready and mature. The only thing that I would say about that is that you just have to make sure that they're in a room. Let's see, how does that work? They can't be alone in a room with their buddy who's 18, if that makes sense. Like you can't have a 16-year-old staff member and an 18-year-old staff member alone together, because that's not two-man deep. So they would need to be in a group housing situation where you have at least 2 adults with a minor at all times in private, non-public view. So in the situation, like you might have a 17-year-old staff member, which I know is not your case, Susan, but I'm just kind of talking about different housing situations. Let's say you have a really mature camper and you say you can go ahead and come on staff at 17. You just need to make sure that they're in a housing situation where they have 2 adults with them. So it could be in a dorm with a bunch of other kids too, or if it's in if there's a cabin situation, there's just got to be 3 people in that room. Is that clear, or did I just create confusion?
That makes sense to me anyway.
Okay. Any other questions about that, about the 17, 18 minor adult situations screening?
Yes, this is Janet. Can you hear me?
Yes, I sure can.
Okay, so I've got this mission trip going to Cincinnati, and I've got, for example, boys. I've got a 15, an 18, a 20, and a 26-year-old. So I've got 1 that's a minor and 3 that are majors.
Okay.
And the girls' side, I've got 2 16, a 21, and a 24. So what do I do? I thought I'd just put them all in the same room. Am I going to be okay
Yeah,
with that?
you're okay. Here's the thing, is that 15-year-old needs to be really aware that they can never be alone in a non-public view place with one of the other adults. Does that make sense? So your 15-year-old boy cannot go off into a classroom and shut the door with the 18-year-old or the 20-year-old or the 26-year-old. Now, if there are 2 adults with them, they can shut the door and go to sleep or whatever they, with the girls, you've got 2 minors. The 2 minors could be alone in a room, changing. That's fine. But the 16-year-old cannot be alone in a room with the 24-year-old by themselves in non-public view. That's just, you have to kind of get your mind wrapped around that.
So if there's 2 16-year-olds in a room with a 21-year-old, is that okay?
No, it has to be 2 adults.
2 adults, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. I mean, I know it sounds weird because these are all leaders and it's really strange and they're going to go, what? But I mean, we have to do this in our youth groups and back in our churches. And it's just, it's hard. I know sometimes it's real hard. In our dorms, if you've got 2 counselors and then a dorm full of minors and one of them has to take a kid to the nurse's station, you're left with 1 adult and 6 kids. You have to basically, what we do is we put a shoe in the door or something to make it public view. We open up the window, or we do something that keeps it from being that 1 adult in a room alone with minors. Because here's the thing, and this is what Ted Johnson told me in the very beginning. He said, look, a child molester first of all, a child molester can pass a screening if they've never been caught. So we can't just depend on the screening to protect the kids and to protect us. So they can molest a kid in a room of 50 kids. So what you're counting on is that second adult being aware and going, hey, that's not an appropriate touch, or you're also protecting your staff, because that second adult can vouch for that other person and say, no, they never left the room alone with that kid, because these kids can falsely accuse our staff members of inappropriate behavior. And so that second adult is who protects you. And I know in the mission trip, it's like your 16-year-old staff member is not going to be accusing your 24-year-old necessarily of improper behavior. But you know what? It, we can't take that chance, and we have to be consistent across the board. Um, People who have these issues with child molestation, pedophiles, they're attracted to youth camps and to church youth groups, and so we just have to have this in place. So I know it's really inconvenient. I live it every day, but it's worth it. Any other questions? No? Okay, let's see. I read the Montana one. I guess, are there any other camps here who maybe want to start a program or have started one and want to beef it up and want to share about that? We've got 10 minutes left. So I'm going to kind of open the floor for any questions or any sharing or anything that, any kind of resources you might want to see us forward your way. I know the ACA, American Camping Association, they have articles on counselor and training programs. There's a lot of videos out there and things that you can use. So if you have resources, please send me links and I will upload them to the GenMin training Google Drive. And then you should all have access to that. I'll send out the links again. And you can download any of those documents that Carrie was showing you. They're all in Word, so they're editable. You can put your own logo at the top and make them yours. So I'll be quiet now and open the floor for anybody else who wants to say something. Wow, we have a quiet bunch, don't we? So no other questions? Nobody has any questions?
I do have one thing to add, I guess.
Thank you.
This is Troy.
Hi, Troy.
Hi. In the times that we've done kind of transitioning the older campers that have gone through to being staff members, one of the biggest problems we had is when we had them on staff with people they were campers with previous, like the year before or 2 years before, because then it was just a weird relationship switch for them. So what we did with most of those kids is try and the new staff members make sure that they're working with the new campers. So, or the younger campers that weren't in there with them kind of as peers, just because that relationship is kind of new. Oh, this is a staff member and they don't already have a relationship together where it's like, oh, he was just a camper the other, last year. Why do we have to listen to him? Or, or it was just different. So we tried to make sure that like the new staff members are mostly working with the junior campers.
Yeah, that's excellent, Troy. We found the exact same thing. Like 99% of the time, campers who are transitioning into staff are in our junior camp and serving our junior campers because of that very reason. And actually, funny that you should say that. We had an issue last year where one of our big brothers, not with our real approval or even recognition that this was happening. I realized it about halfway through camp. He was chumming up. He was going and hanging out with a senior dorm because he had apparently too much free time, and he was hanging out with the campers, but he didn't have all the same restrictions as the campers. So I felt personally that it caused a ruffle in that dorm, and you're right, because he was basically the same age as some of those campers, maybe 6 months older or 3 months older, that he got to come in as a big brother. But and that's where we have failed. We have not had adequate, I think, for us, structure and supervision for our big brothers and big sisters. These are apparently the lesser mature, and they had more free time, which actually requires more maturity than some of our other staff. So we've got to flip our program to give them more structure, and because really they're the ones that need more teaching and more accountability than our staff members. And it seemed to be the opposite last year. We give the less mature ones more freedom, which that's not a good plan. So yeah, thank you, Troy. I appreciate that. That confirms the same thing we've experienced. Anybody else have any questions or comments, shared experiences?
I've got just a thought. I just sent you guys a message about it. we may end up with some of those circumstances like we would have here at Pathways. We've got like 6 or 7 seniors in high school, and they're all graduating, but they're all different ages. Some of them are 18, some of them are 17. Like in my son's particular case, they'll all graduate. They'll all be graduating high school. They'll all be going to college. But Kyle turns 18 a week after camp, and so, and yet, if they were going to college, you've got those kids whose birthdays are in September. When they go to college, they're in dorms with 18, 19, 20-year-olds. It may still remain our policy, but I think it's a question that we can ask in those kind of circumstances, like if they've graduated from high school or if they've gone into college or that kind of thing. So it may still be our policy and remain our policy. But I just thought, because I think the question I had was, with the never alone policy, here you've got kids who've been together all of their lives, right? And they're friends, they're all together, but they can never be alone.
Right. I know, isn't that crazy? Yeah.
So I mean, at the very least, it's just a matter of, it's just a matter of a question. So
yeah,
that dynamic will be a unique one and an odd one, but it's one that's legit. It's real. Yeah,
it is real. And yeah, I think maybe we could take that up with Anthony and see what he would say to that, or maybe even our legal counsel, which is just such a benefit of being a part of this network, is we have a legal team who can answer these kinds of questions. And I think the biggest thing for us is we want to show consistency.
Right.
And I think that's what we would say to them. And definitely someone like your son, he'll be 17, like if he, ends up on staff somewhere, we'll just make it work with him being 17, but we have to get him starting to think in those terms. And it takes a while to get people to think in those terms of never alone and 2-man deep. But it has to just become something that we do it, not because it makes sense necessarily, but we do it because obviously your son knows that his 18-year-old buddy who grew up with is not going to molest him. I mean, that's obvious, right? But we do it for the greater good of the whole camp and of the whole camp network. And how to get them to realize they can't run over to the bathhouse together, that's tough, and it, what, sometimes those things slip and it happens, and you just say, hey, let's try better next time. You don't freak out about it, obviously, but we have to just kind of get people thinking that way, like never alone, never alone, never alone, adult alone with a minor. So the transitions are the hard part, Jeff, though. You're right. Transitioning from minor to adult. Any other questions? I hope this has been helpful. I really appreciated Carrie putting the time into sharing those documents, and as the programs refine, we might add to this or do another update to this video. We can add stuff later, but I think this will be great to have this recorded for the camps that don't have programs yet. They can have their other staff members watch it, and then we'll just keep growing and developing these programs. So
one last thing I would add, just talking about the structure, what I found worked is, having all of that in place at the very beginning of the week and saying, hey, here's our expectations, here's what your limits are. It made it a lot easier to give them a little bit more freedom as, Thursday rolled around and Friday came, that I could send one or two of them, hey, I need you to go do this. Can you do it? And know that they would be mindful and not goof off or use it to go do their own thing. And it was easy to be less strict as the week went on because they had it all up front. So I mean, we all kind of know that, but it did work really well.
That is a great principle for all of camp. I mean, you start strict, and then you can always loosen up. Going the other way very, very rarely works when you start loose and try and tighten up. So great principle, Carrie. That's excellent. So start out with your expectations, with your staff, with your campers, with your big brothers, big sisters, and then you can always loosen up, and give them a little more freedom as they've earned that. So excellent point. Okay, well, it is 5:59 by my clock, or for some of you, 8:59. Time for bed, right? And somebody just wrote a long post. Is that Mark?
That was Jeff's post question.
Oh, that was Jeff's post. Okay, I see it now. Okay. Well, if there aren't any other questions, last call for questions, comments. Jeff, would you mind closing us out in prayer?
Oh, no problem. No problem. Let's do it. Lord, thank you so much for the beauty of this technology that we have, where we can gather together from all over the country and share thoughts, share ideas, but actually share documents and things and see them in real time. So much has changed, and it allows us to do so much, and we're grateful for that, because we have such a group of people who have so much to offer each other. Thank you for the relationship. Thank you for Mark and Ann. Thank you for the time that they put into it. Thank you for everybody who's given of their time tonight to be on the call, to share what their thoughts are, to share what their experiences are. And we just ask that you will continue to bless us as we look to serve your young people and to serve you and join you in what you're doing with them. We want to equip leaders for our denomination, but also leaders for the body, for the greater body. We want to be effective at it. We want to be safe with it. And we want to join you in what you're doing in their lives. And we just ask that you will continue to open our minds and open our eyes to see new things. And if there's, as Ann mentioned, if there's things that we can add to this presentation going forward, we pray that we'll be able to do that. Thank you, and ask your blessing as everyone prepares for camp. We know that this is getting toward that time where it's starting to get a little dicey for numbers, and people are getting concerned. We just ask that you will just fill every camp to exactly what you want it to be, that you will bless every one of us. We ask your blessing on all of us tonight. In Jesus' name do we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Who said go Kentucky Wildcats? Cheer on Anthony's team as they play later this evening. All right, well, for all you March Madness people, that's probably why Anthony's not on the call. Y'all can give him a really hard time that he's probably watching the game. Okay, well, thank you all for coming, and I'm going to stop recording, and then if you want to say goodbye or say anything.